Hello, BookTube. I have a gigantic book haul to go through with you. It's not from the Battle Bookshop. It's not from any charity shop. It's not from the basement of a church in Boston. Instead, this was a massive gift from a friend. A massive pile of books. Deserves a video of its own. Could be rather long. Now, I don't know for sure that the friend who gave me these books is okay with me sharing his identity on camera. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you impenetrable clues that will not help you at all. Like, for instance, he's from Vermont and he's a little crusty. That doesn't really help you, but I'm afraid I can't say anything more than that in good conscience. Anyway, we're going to go through these books, and I don't know how long this is going to take. We'll start with the periodicals, because believe it or not, there is a periodical in this pile. An old periodical that I'm going to have to ask Sarah at the Bookish Knitter about. It's this. It's World's Best Romances from Harlequin. A periodical that has short romances in it. What's in here? Slow Burn by Mary Lynn Baxter. Together Again by Ruth Jean Dale. How Sweet It Is by Roseanne Williams. And Yesterday's Love by Cheryl Woods. I don't know anything about this magazine. This is issue number 5. It was $3.50. But I don't know anything about it. Was this in bookstores? And are the things that are in here excerpts from longer works, or are they original short stories? And how long did this run? I have a million questions for Sarah about this thing, but I'm going to read my way through it. Absolutely. Now, where are we going to put these things? I have no idea, because I've got a drowsy little baby bean right next to me. She's very drowsy from ordering her kingdom, from ordering people around while we were outside, including a wonderful pit bull. Oh my, he was so sweet. He was just a lovely pitty, just the head as wide as a garden shovel. And I squatted down, and he was dancing all around, and he was bouncing up and down, and he was squirming and shivering his whole body, and he was licking my face. And it's very nice, because I don't have access to a smooth-faced dog anymore. I have, the Kaiser, the German Kaiser, Otto von Bismarck licks my face every day. And then when he got extra excited, and he had the same progression of thought that pitties always do. He thought, well, it feels really good to lick your face. Maybe it would feel even better to put your whole face in my mouth. He tried to do that. And Frida read him the riot act, and I was covered in slime. It was wonderful. Anyway, we're going to start off with the mass market paperbacks, now that we're done with the periodical. We will start off with murder mysteries. So I got an Elizabeth Peters, Silhouette in Scarlet. Have not read these old Elizabeth Peters in forever. This is an Amelia Peabody mystery, no? No, this is Dr. Victoria Bliss. Have not read this since it came out. I think I would probably have seen this in the 1990s. 1983 this came out. This tour edition was 1990. That's probably when I saw it, and that's probably when I read it. Then we have, this is going to be so much fun. This is the great Donald Westlake, but this is him writing under a different name, Richard Stark. So we have The Damsel, The Blackbird, and The Dame. And Westlake is great. He's not known by enough people. He has one champion at the University of Chicago Press, and bless Levi for that, for being vociferous. But he's terrific. He's come up on this channel many, many times. He was also a friend, and he channeled something different when he wrote a book under the name Richard Stark. He channeled something. His Richard Stark books don't read like his Donald Westlake books do. We have a lot of people in this gigantic book haul who wrote under pen names of one kind or another, including multiple pen names for one person. But a lot of the times when in examples that we're going to see, the end result, the books, are the same. That wasn't true with Westlake. When he's writing as Richard Stark, it's a different kind of book. It's sharper. It's darker and angrier. It's a different kind of reading experience, and I don't have any Richard Stark books here. Now I have 3 to get me going. Then we also have these old things, these Phoebe Atwood Taylor. These are A.C. Mayo murder mysteries, The Mystery of the Cape Cod Players, and Sandbar Sinister. Not Bar Sinister, but Sandbar Sinister. These are from these old foul play paperbacks. And when these were coming out, also in the 90s, is that right? 1986 for Sandbar Sinister, and then This one will be 1987. When these were coming out, I was very happy to see them because I love these murder mysteries. They're set on an old Cape Cod. They star AC Mayo, who is a Macintosh-wearing, road car driving, handyman, everyman. He's not connected with the police, but he is the kind of voice of sanity, of reason on the island of Martha's Vineyard that everybody relies on when there's a spot of trouble, and there's a lot of trouble, a lot of murders, that he just sort of helps with. They're really, really wonderful. And I was happy to see them reprinted in the early 90s. But I always complained about these books, not only because the cover artwork is usually terrible. I don't know of any example of these Foul Play Press books where the Acer Mayo cover artwork is any good, but also because they're poorly made. You're not going to be able to tell in this video, but that has a lot of resistance to it. If you were reading this as a paperback, it's going to fall apart on you, which is why I've gone through so many of these things. So I was very happy to get two. I will read them. I no longer, with these Foul Play Press books, with the white square mass market paperbacks of the Judge D mysteries, they have a uniform look, but I have made my peace with the fact that they are not going to survive a read. It's a terrible feeling, but you just have to do it. Of course, when we're talking about mass market mystery, there has to be an Agatha Christie. This is one I haven't read in forever, if I ever have. This is Mr. Parker Pyne, Detective, with his great classic cover artwork. We've seen this same cover artwork, the same cover artist, on a few different murder mysteries in book hauls over the years on this channel. I don't know that the author is ever credited. One of you probably knows who it is. One of you is probably a pulp expert who knows who that is. Now, the cover artist is not, it's very distinctive, but it's not credited. But this is neither Poirot nor Miss Marple. Then we have, oh my, I wish I had 10 of these. This is Emma Latham, the writing duo that wrote under the name Emma Latham. This is one of innumerable Boston connections when it comes to these books. Although you wouldn't know it when you see these. This is Pick Up Sticks. And then we have When in Greece and Murder Makes the Wheels Go Round. These are all from the same reprint line that did these briefly. Emma Latham, I don't think, is in print at the moment. I don't think there's been an attempt to print these books. This was a writing duo, one of whom had very deep and wonderful roots in Boston. And these are terrific. The main sleuth is like no one that I've ever seen in the murder mysteries that I have read. He is a banker. He's an assistant vice president for one of the most powerful banks in the world, who just happens to get involved in murder mysteries. And when the authors were questioned about I believe that's him. I believe that's supposed to be him. His name is John Putnam Thatcher, and he has a whole bunch of colleagues that really stand out. The secondary characters in these books, both the suspects and also the people at the bank, are wonderfully done. But I believe that when the authors were questioned, why on earth would you choose a vice president at a bank for your sleuth, they said, believe me, one of the two authors here had extensive experience and connections in the finance world, and said, believe you me, a banker will be on the spot. A banker can get involved in any kind of mystery. I have not read these in forever. This reprint line was from the 80s. 1985 is when in Greece came out. With this kind of, I don't think this is part of it, but these are part of that line. What I wouldn't give. I never see these in a used bookstore. What I wouldn't give to find all of them, or to find ebooks of them. But Emma Latham they're a fantastic reading experience. Sharp as an ice pick. Beautifully done. And then this thing, which I do not know at all. One of you will probably know this a lot better. This is Ted Albury, The Girl from Addis. I don't know this author at all. I don't think I've ever read anything. I don't recognize the name in any way. But he wrote a lot of books. These seem to be... Johnny Grant seems to be the main character. The last time Johnny had been in Ethiopia, he'd been thrown out of the country. Now he was back, ostensibly as an ace photographer, but his past was still remembered by his old employers as well as the Ethiopians. No idea who Johnny Grant is. I guess this will be a thriller set in Ethiopia, right? Which will, of course, bring to mind that immortal line. Are we going to Addis Ababa, Mr. Luthor? Anyway, we'll continue with the mass market paperbacks. The next one is the only nonfiction, which was a classic book of its time. I have not read this since it was briefly in vogue. And that had to be in the 1970s, right? 1973. This is by Harriet Weaver, and it is called Frosty, a Raccoon to Remember. In the 1970s, there was a vogue, a brief vogue of animal rehabilitation, animal domestication, animal companionship memoirs. The whole thing was kicked into high gear by Born Free, but there were a million such things. There were at least 3 books about raccoons. There were a ton about owls, one about a skunk, a couple about squirrels, and a famous one that eventually became a famous trio about an otter. They're largely wonderful. The whole, you can make a library of these things just from the 70s and the early 80s. And I have not read this since then. So I can't wait. Raccoons are really, really fun. They're really interesting in domestication because they are so eerily like humans. They Other animals that you take into domestication or semi-domestication, they lunge at their impulses. They fumble around. Raccoons have hands that they can actually use as hands. They have hands that they can actually use. And they don't just lunge at things. They think about things before they do it. It makes them very interesting in books like that. Then we have a block of Westerns. Mass market Westerns. Right in the shadow of June on the Range 2023. And for those of you who maybe somehow don't know, Michael K. Vaughan invented last year, he invented a booktube event that took off like gangbusters. June on the Range, in June, where we read Western novels. And I have been stockpiling Western mass markets for the occasion. I also have a ton of Westerns on ebooks. I found that in this gigantic mail haul, or book haul, there are a ton of Westerns here. We got John Daniels. This is The Crossing. Classic Western cover there. That steep descent. I used to know John Daniels rather extensively in the men's room of the old Odeon at Leeds. I guarantee this is not him. I didn't have a literary bone or other organ in his body, but I'll be interested. I've never read anything by that author. That's going to happen with Western novels. Although some names are more familiar than others. Like for instance, this is called One Man Posse, and it's by Max Brand. Well, I'm not sure I remember. I don't remember if I got around to Max Brand last June on the Range, but he's mindlessly prolific. He has thousands of books to his name, so I'll certainly do it this time. Then another Max Brand. This is older. This is The Long Chase. Another great cover there. One thing that I noticed when June on the Range really made me concentrate on old dime store Westerns, not just the big ones that you know, but all of these millions and millions of also rans, is how lovely a lot of the cover artwork is. I just blew that off originally. But this has a man riding into the water down a cliff to escape armed pursuit. Max Brand. Then we have Steve Lawrence, but I'm assuming not the Steve Lawrence, who was in my day known as a velvet-voiced crooner, but his only stab at genuine immortality is as a mobster in a sauna scene in the Blues Brothers. I don't think this is him. This is called North to Montana. Slattery was a hard man to scare and a tougher one to kill. And he's got a gun, but a hugely oversized hangman's noose behind him there. So can't wait. Then also Steve Thurman. This is The Hungry Gun. The town had an appetite for violence, and Will Cade fed it hot lead. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Then we have romances and a little bit of gothic stuff, and some books that are on the borderline between the two. 3 we have here by Emily Loring, who is a fascinating character, absolutely fascinating, who has never, as far as I know, had any kind of critical attention. He's probably never had a biography. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm pretty sure that the vast body of her personal papers have been collected. But like a few people in this giant book haul, she's had no critical attention whatsoever, even though she was immensely popular as a novelist. And her personal story was interesting. Like a lot of people in this list, she wrote her way out of a bad situation. You'd think that stories like that would be more popular. But there's one fact about her life and her books that I'm racking my brains on. I really should check Wikipedia to make sure. I have, from Emily Loring, I have Fair Tomorrow, straight up romance. We have Swiftwater, another straight up romance. Although a lot of her books, I've read a few of her books. Can't remember if I read these. I'll know in the first few pages. But a lot of her books have really good descriptions and really sort of murky atmosphere. They aren't just straight up romances, as we're going to get to. And then The Trail of Conflict. So I got 3 Emily Lorings, and the thing I need to remember about Emily Loring is her death happened at the halfway point of her career. That makes reading her books a little bit on the tricky side. She died, and her family, I think, maybe a son, certainly her literary estate, kept her books going for a long time. There's like dozens of books that came after she died, and I don't know what these are. I don't know that back in, these were from the 70s. Is that right? 1969. I'm not sure that in 1969, Bantam Books would have gone out of their way to let you know. I would think that somewhere at Bantam Books in 1969, an executive would have said, well, if we put that this is by the Emily Loring estate instead of by Emily Loring, the books that we label that way won't sell. So let's not say. I don't know. I'll have to find out. I'll have to look her up. If she's on Wikipedia, she might not be. Then we have something, Naomi Hintz. This is You'll Like My Mother. Gothic. Vintage Gothic from Fawcett. This must be from the 60s. 69. Apparently originally had a hardcover edition. I don't know it at all. And then Straightforward Romance. Harlequin category romances, which is perfect because I have a second channel, chatting category romances with Sarah from The Bookish Knitter. I have a bunch of them. I have a huge number of ebooks. I have a ton of them here, and I'm also buying new ones, but I have a bunch of old ones now. I wonder how many of these she has or maybe wants. I'd be happy to put them in the mail to Canada. We have Sandra Martin, Fly Like an Eagle. Tom Selleck mustache there. We have this is a zebra historical by Jean Innes, Secret Touch. Well, these classic old covers here. This is from the 1980s, 1992. But most of these are categories. Like, for instance, we have Silhouette Romance. This is Practical Dreamer. Silhouette contemporary romance there. This is just a straight-up Harlequin romance. No subcategory, just the straight-up Harlequin. This is Summer's Pride by Angela Wells. Postmark Spain. So maybe he is a Spaniard. We have another Harlequin Presents. Kathy Williams, Charade of the Heart. What do we have here? Oh, well, of course, if you're going to talk romance novels, you're going to talk Barbara Cartland, and she's going to make appearances in this massive book haul. This is A Theater of Love by Barbara Cartland, which is 100th Jubilee edition. I don't know what that means. Is this the 100th novel that Barbara Cartland wrote? She wrote like 1,000 novels, so I don't know if this is or not. And I also don't know if this is a Regency. A lot of times she did these very uniform 150-page romances that wandered into the Victorian era or earlier to the Wicked Uncles. I don't know. Then we have another Harlequin Presents. This is Michelle Reed, A Question of Pride. And also A Question of a Puppy, I'm guessing. But it doesn't matter to me. I find these things fascinating. Then we have, this is a paperback library romance number 16 by Anne Tedlock Brooks. This is With a Heart Full of Love. The original title of this thing was The Peacock Feather. From 1956. So this is probably the oldest romance here, not a Harlequin. Still a category of some kind or other. This would fit for chatting category. I ought to read it just to see what it would be like. Then we have a Harlequin Intrigue, Music of the Mist by Laura Pender. And he is trying to save her. He's got a very nice knitted cable sweater on. She's just wearing a nightgown. She just showed up all casual. It looks like they're falling off a platform of some kind, or maybe down a spiral staircase. But Harlequin Intrigues. Mm-hmm. Then we have Harlequin Romance, just an ordinary Harlequin Romance. This is Unexpected Hazard by Sophie Weston. He's a race car driver, I'm guessing. Could this be even older? 1978. No, it's not any older. There's Lindsay Wagner, The Bionic Woman. Then we have, what is this? Second Chance at Love book. Okay, so this is a Harlequin. This is very much a knockoff Harlequin. This is Beth Brooks, Untamed Desire. Second Chance at Love. I guess that was the publisher. Sarah would probably know the backstories of a lot of these things, but I don't. I don't have any idea. Then we move to a Harlequin super romance. I don't think they make the super romances anymore. And I'm not sure what the distinguishing quality was. Was it just that they were longer? Again, I'll have to ask our BookTube expert. But this is by Karen Young, and it's The Silence of Midnight. And it says the 500th. I don't know. Is this super romance number 500? The category, the serial number up there does end in 500. Maybe this is the 500th one. Don't know much about super romances. And those are the mass market paperbacks. We ended with a blast of romances. There are more romances here, but they're hardcovers, because all the rest of this is hardcovers. So we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. And when you're starting at the bottom of a book, you're starting with a book that you know is going to be tedious, boring, and poorly done. Paging President Herbert Hoover. This is American Industrialism by President Herbert Hoover. This is from 1922, and this will probably be very interesting. Of course, it's more interesting to me now because I read, a few years ago, I read a great book about the writings of U.S. presidents. I think it was called Author-in-Chief. I don't remember the details off the top of my head, but it was great. I'm probably blurbed on the paperback because I sang its praises. Tried to get everyone to read it, which makes it extra ironic that I don't remember the details, but I think it was called Author-in-Chief, and it was great. And it, plus 2 relatively recent Herbert Hoover biographies, one called Herbert Hoover and one called Herbert Hoover in the White House, grudgingly changed my mind about Herbert Hoover, so that I no longer reflexively think of him as the brainless autocrat who caused the Great Depression. I now realize that it would have happened anyway, it happened on his watch, and that maybe there's some truth to the argument that he did what he could to mitigate it. That no one could have stopped it, but that he did what he could to mitigate it. I don't think that's going to change my estimation of his prose, but we will see. Now I have no excuse not to. Then we have, this is a classic, No Room in the Ark by Alan Moorhead, the author of The White Nile and the Black Nile. This is a fully illustrated natural history sort of walkabout of African wildlife from 80 years ago, more than that. So you get all the animals in here that are pictured in here are not only dead, but their species are on the brink of extinction. But this is the author's personal views of them, and I really, really like this author. So how are we going to do this? I don't want to disturb the bean. We'll just put the hardcovers down there. Then we have, this is a classic. I have had this in mass market. I've had this in hardcover. I don't have it at the moment. I didn't until I saw this here. This is The Return of Moriarty by John Gardner. And there are 2 authors who are called John Gardner. This is not my John Gardner. But a couple of you rather uncannily identified as one of. This is not my John Gardner. This is the British John Gardner who did 007 novels, and he did these novels are of Moriarty returning from Reichenbach Falls, where John Gardner decides, well, if Holmes can survive a plunge into the Reichenbach Falls, then so can Moriarty. These are some of the best Sherlock Holmes pastiche novels ever done. So to have this in a nice sturdy hardcover is very nice. Then we have this thing. I don't know if this was ever actually for commercial sale. It's just a little pamphlet. Boston, England, and Boston, New England. A dual look at Boston, the one where I live, and the Boston in England. And this has all kinds of illustrations in it from both, where we look at the parallel places. Where I've been to Boston, England, of course. I was with, the last time I was there, I was with an old friend, and we had somewhere along the line picked up 2 acquaintances that didn't really know us all that well. And the acquaintances had heard stories from me about Boston, Massachusetts, and wanted to take pictures of me in Boston, England. I wasn't much for taking pictures when I was traveling, but this is going to be a lot of fun to go through. Then this next one is the only thing in this entire mail haul that I actually have here at Hyde Cottage. It's the only duplicate out of 100 books. This is the only one. This is Boston and Some Noted Emigres. This was not for commercial sale. This was printed privately by a company, but it's really, really good. It's really, really interesting. And this is in a lot better shape than the copy that I have, which I think is cropped up on library tours, but I'm very happy to have it. Then we have 2 Cape Cod books. These are a type that are done all the time. Cape Cod is, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with your U.S. states and commonwealths, Massachusetts is like a rectangle, but it has a hook extending out into the Atlantic Ocean, and that hook is Cape Cod. I love it. I know it really well, and I love it. And these are the kinds of things that you see in Cape Cod bookstores all the time. We have the authors of both of these. Jack Schutte and Jim Coogan are the authors. This is Cape Cod Companion, which is just a potted history of Cape Cod, notable people, that sort of thing, notable places, and then Cape Cod Voyage. I have seen these things. I'm sure I have in innumerable visits to the bookstores of Cape Cod, but I don't have either one of them. Then we have Mischief in the Mountains. This is Strange Tales of Vermont and Vermonters. Because, again, the cryptic clue that I gave you to the person who sent me these is that he's from Vermont. I'm afraid I can't, in the interest of protecting his privacy, I can't divulge more than that he's from Vermont and that he's crusty. It's not going to help you any. Speaking of Vermont, we have the classic first-person rural. These are stories of someone taking over and writing about a farm in Vermont. First-person rural took off. It was a huge success. It gave rise to a last-person rural, more Vermont essays about just the weirdness of the place. Everybody up there is weird, but it's also wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You will get up there to Vermont. Let's say that you're a guest in a very, very old house. You'll get up there, and you will notice you'll be all tense because you're from somewhere else in the country. You'll be all tense. You'll get up there. Maybe you've heard that everyone in Vermont is armed to the teeth, and you'll be thinking, all right, this is a loony hatch. And you'll get up there, and you'll notice that in a day, maybe 2 days, you start to unclench. You start to breathe. You notice how many trees there are. You notice that you're not going 2 feet without there being a rushing brook somewhere. And you'll also notice that your hosts and every Vermonter that you're meeting, sure, they're nuts, but they're wonderful. They're absolutely welcoming and wonderful. And these books capture that. So it's got 3 books about Vermont. That's great. Then we have a book about birds. This is Lewis Hale's book, The Appreciation of Birds. So a bird book with illustrations. Let me get you. There we go. I wonder, is this author from Vermont? No. When he wrote this book, he lived in Geneva, Switzerland. Well, I'm always up for a bird book, so it doesn't matter to me. Then we have an older book. This is another example. Like Emily Loring, like maybe Emma Latham, this is another example of an author who was hugely popular and is not known at all anymore. And whose story has never been told. I don't think this author's papers have ever been collected. I don't think a biography has ever been written, and the biography is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. This is Marjorie Bowen, and this is her book, The Soldier from Virginia, which is a hagiographical novel about George Washington, but she's terrific. She really is. This is also illustrated, I remember correctly. Let me find an illustration so you can see. There we go. There's a curiously sexy George Washington talking there in a parlor. I don't know how many illustrations are in here. You're never going to encounter. I never find this author in the wild. There's another one. Ladies looking out the window. This author is fascinating, and I would really like it. She has actually been recommended to me. She hasn't been recommended to me in a long time, but about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, someone recommended her Gothic stuff to me. She wrote endlessly, just endlessly. I never see her in used bookstores, never, out in the wild. This is the only book of hers I've ever owned. I've only read her out from libraries. But she wrote a vast amount, and a lot of it is sort of, I'm told, atmospheric Gothic. And the person who recommended it to me, may rest in peace, he knew that I'm not a big fan of Gothic literature. He said, I bet you'd like this. I bet you would like this author. I read a couple of historical novels. I've never read this one, and I've never read any of the Gothic stuff, but I'll gladly read it anyway. Then we have this thing. This is Maggie Davis. I do not know this author at all. This is The Far Side of Home. More historical fiction. Just a big painting on the cover there. Is this Civil War? Yeah, this is Civil War. This is the end papers of the Battle of Jonesboro. Don't know this author at all. Don't know what I'm in for. Also, here's Shirley Seifert. I think this author was also mindlessly prolific. I think I've read one book, but it wasn't this. This is Farewell, My General. I think this is also Southern sympathizing American. Yeah, this is Confederacy fiction. Not illustrated, but I never know. This is from the 1930s? 1954. Sometimes these are really hidden gems. They're really good, even though, of course, I don't share the sympathies of the author. I think instead of pining after her Confederate general as he rides off to war, my dear, she should be training a rifle on his back and pulling the trigger. But the book could still be really good. Lord knows George Washington has just surprised me with a couple of pieces of good fiction from around the time when this book was written. Then we can finish up this batch of the hardcovers with romances. We have, for instance, Victoria Holt. Victoria Holt, like a lot of the things in this gigantic book haul, that was pen name for an incredibly prolific author who, again, I don't think, unless I'm wrong, this author has never had a biography written. When male authors from the time when she was handily outselling them have dozens. Anyway, this was I think one of her best-selling books, The Silk Vendetta, in a hardcover, nice big florid thing there, no fault at all on the back. We have We have The Lord of the Far Island, which I don't think I've ever read. I made a point of reading this author once I started to warm up to romances. I was told that Victoria Holt was someone who doesn't like romances could read. I don't think that's true, but I don't think I've ever read this one. This is also, I bet, from the 1950s. 1975. The Lord of the Far Island. And then we'll do more romance, but we're going down a few notches in quality here from Victoria Holt. Victoria Holt she's really good. A lot of you will know her as, writing under the pen name of Jean Plady for historical fiction. But she was very good. She was like a lot of the lady authors that I've been showing you that just churned out one book after another, and they're all really good. They're all a scrupulously high level of literary quality. Mostly forgotten. I don't think Victoria Holt is in print anymore, under any pen name. Amazing to me, but nevertheless. This next author, not in print, but outsold them all, and she makes her fated return on this book all. This is Barbara Cartland. I have an anthology here. 3 best-loved Barbara Cartlands with the covers to all 3. So what are the 3 that are in here? Look at this. The by this author section has to be in columns because she's written so many books. And she wasn't nearly done when this came out. This anthology came out in the 1970s, it looks like. And the 3 books that are in here are Bewitched, A Sword to the Heart, and The Glittering Lights. So 3 Barbara Cartlands. I can never get enough of Barbara Cartland, so it's fine by me. Then more Barbara Cartland. Here, this is another one. She wrote very short books, as we saw. Her books are like 150 pages soaking wet with rocks in their pockets. So you could easily put 2 of them in one slim book. And this publisher did. This is The Ghost Who Fell in Love and The Chieftain Without a Heart. So 2 Barbara Cartlands. We get the cover to one of them on the front and the cover to the other one on the back. And then another twofer for Barbara Cartland. This is Love for Sale and Lost Laughter, with the cover to one on one side and the cover to the other on the other. So I've got a lot of Barbara Cartland here where I did not before. Then we have Irving Stone. I have recommended Irving Stone many, many times. I'm a fan of this author. I believe that the mystery donor of these books is also a fan of this author. I'm not a fan of everything that he wrote. Irving Stone is best known for Lust for Life, his big novel about Vincent van Gogh. And he also, once upon a time, was incredibly famous for The Agony and the Ecstasy, his huge novel about Michelangelo and Pope Julius II. When will you make an end? But he was incredibly prolific. He wrote a lot in a long lifetime of books. You can't always have hits when you do that. And also, even if a book is really good, it might not be my cup of tea. I don't, for instance, like his Van Gogh book. And that's probably connected with the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Van Gogh's paintings. Whereas his book called The Origin, about Darwin on the HMS Beagle, I think is great. But that's because I'm a huge fan of Darwin. This book is probably going to suffer from that, but I haven't read it in forever, and it didn't look like this. This hardcover might be original. This is from 1951. It could easily be that this is what it looked like originally. This is The President's Lady by Irving Stone, and it's a book of his about Andrew Jackson and his wife. And I think that this came out it's a thin thing compared to a lot of Irving Stone. I think this came out after. He wrote a book called Immortal Wife, I think was the name of it, or Immortal Beloved. No, I think it was Immortal Wife. Or no, it was, he wrote a book called Those Who Love, which is about John and Abigail Adams. And it was longer and much more of an Irving Stone production. And it was much better than this. And at least that's my reaction. I don't think I've read this in half a century. I think I read it as a mass market paperback, and I don't think the mass market paperback looked like this. I don't think they reproduced this cover image. And again, I'm perfectly willing to admit that I might be influenced by the fact that I hate Andrew Jackson. I hate him as a figure in American history. I think he's a figure of almost pure evil. So I don't really care if he loved his wife. And I'm pretty sure that if I remember correctly, that's the burden of this book, is that I'm supposed to care. But getting it in this mega book haul means I will reread it. And who knows, a lot of these things will be voyages of discovery for me. I'll be reading these things all summer. Then we have an old friend. This is an old friend. This is not a biography or a collection of life and letters. This is not any nonfiction. This is instead a novel. This is from 1886. This is Prudence Palfrey by Thomas Bailey Aldrich. I'm pretty sure this is the only BookTube channel where I could say that Thomas Bailey Aldrich's name has come up before on this channel. It has. This is an illustration behind one of those onion skin protectors. Look at that. Does this have other illustrations? Are you also illustrated? No, I think it's just the one illustration at the beginning. I know this is going to sound so strange. It's the dumbest flex in the world. I know everything there is to know about Thomas Bailey Aldrich. I know everything there is to know about him. I know more about him than anyone in the world today. That no one is ever going to attempt a critical biography of this person. No one is ever going to write a biography, a popular biography of any kind. If they do, they're going to need the half shelf of primary documents that I have over there underneath Larry the Lavender Plant. I have all the stuff that you would need to write a biographical sketch of this person, at least, if not a full-dress biography. But I haven't owned a copy of one of his novels ever. So now I have this. I would say that this will take pride of place as the first thing that I will read from this massive dragon horde. But naturally, these books derailed my reading last night. And I was looking at all of them. And I was thinking, all right, which one of you is going to come into the little book room for tonight's reading? I had reading that I had to do. Deadline reading, work-related reading. I can't let this massive book haul derail my reading for the rest of the summer. I can't let that happen. And this was in the running, but I have to say, it was When in Greece by Emma Latham that won out. That was the first one that I read from. I'm going to read everything from this. But his fiction. And then we get to the finish up of this thing, and this is probably the most epic thing. No, probably about it. This is the most epic thing in this book haul. I have mentioned on this channel from Brattle book hauls that when I find a bound omnibus of old magazine issues, we've seen McClure's, we've seen the Century magazine, I've shown you old Harper's collections. When I find one of those, once upon a time, those magazines were bound into big volumes, usually for libraries. And they were a going concern. Hundreds of thousands of people read these things. So libraries wanted them bound so that they could be used as books, as they could be checked out as normal books in the collection. They knew that there was a readership for them. And I love those volumes because when you're thumbing through one of those volumes, sure, you will come across a poem by Walt Whitman. Sure, you will come across a story by Louisa May Alcott. And you will know that poem by Walt Whitman and that story by Louisa May Alcott are anthologized. They are collected somewhere else. But while you're flipping through those issues, you will come across things, tons of things, that no one has ever bothered to collect, that no one has ever bothered to anthologize on their own. These bound editions, since the individual issues of the magazine are so delicate, so fragile, these bound copies of those magazines are probably the only place you're likely to find a lot of the stuff that's in them. A lot of the stuff that's in them will have been born of literary reputations that are gone. They are vanished. Like so many of the people that we're seeing in this book haul. They once had enormous sales, enormous literary reputations. Once upon a time, if you were a bookstore clerk and someone came in and said, I want the new Emily Loring, you had to know the last 10 Emily Lorings. She was that popular. Same thing with Marjorie Bowen. She was really, really popular. And she had a great story. She has a great origin story. Someone could write a great novel about her. I mean, a great biography about her. That the same thing is what you will find in these bound anthologies. You will find gem after gem, things that no one has anthologized or found at all. Many is the time when I have been reading a biography, a scholarly biography of some figure, and the biographer will say, it's a shame that my subject never wrote anything about this particular incident, maybe a ferry crash or a minor riot in Central Park or something like that. We know he was in New York at the time. It's a shame he never put pen to paper and wrote about it. And I'm reading the biography, a biographer who knows everything there is to know about this person. I'm thinking, he did write about it. He wrote a piece about it for the Atlantic Monthly. The biography just doesn't know about it because half these things aren't indexed. And if you don't have access to those bound volumes, you might not know what's in them. You might not have any idea what they contain, and you will have a harder time having access to those volumes now than ever before. It gets harder with every passing year. And my mystery benefactor sent me an entire shelf of bound Atlantic monthlies from the American Civil War era. Can you see that? Can you make that out? This says 1860. That is John Winthrop on the spine of the Atlantic Monthly. Because John Winthrop was the original poobah of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was the coiner of the phrase, a city on a hill. And for a long, long time, for most of its history, the Atlantic, that you now get as a magazine, an overpriced magazine from Washington, for most of its history, it was a Boston magazine. And this is just, well, let's see. This is volume 5, and this covers, oh God, well, all right, this isn't going to say, but this has just endless essays and pieces from the 1860 run of the Atlantic Monthly. Here is volume 4. This is from 1859. Let's just go through these here. This is volume 7, 1861. In one of the 1861 volumes in here, there is an essay warning the southern states that you're playing with fire here. You're making all kinds of demands about what the rest of the country should and shouldn't allow in the territories. You want them to be slave states, we want them to be free states, and you're playing with fire because one editorial writer in an 1861 issue of the Atlantic Monthly actually said, you're playing with fire on this issue because you think you're the majority and you're not. You think you're the only ones with guns and you're not. You think you would win if you fought with the North, and you wouldn't. You don't have any industry, except the industry we want to destroy, or at least the industry we don't want you to propagate elsewhere, outside your boundaries. You don't have any industry other than that, and we do. If there's a war, you'll lose, and we'll all be the worse for it because it will be long and bloody. That happened in the Atlantic Monthly, and no one knows the author of that anymore or collects that. Here is volume 2. This is from 1858. Who do we have here in terms of... and you see here we've got... This thing is sort of coming off the binder. The miracle here is that that's the only one of all of these where that is true. These are in rock solid shape. Who have we got here? Do we have any? Well, this 1858 in the Atlantic is running in serial form, The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table by Oliver Wendell Holmes, which became a book, and people forget that it was ever serialized, but it is serialized in here. But I wonder if this will even tell us. No, it won't. It won't even tell us who authors are. Let's just keep going here. I said this might be long. This is volume 19. This is from 1867. It's thinner. It's in perfect shape, like the day that it was made. What have we got here? Glacial phenomenon in Maine. Driftwood fire. Comic journalism. This will have fiction. It will have nonfiction. This is not going to give me... it has okay. By 1867, it is listing authors. So who have we got for authors here? I know all of these names, especially the Boston names. I know all the ones that contributed 6 pieces to the Atlantic Monthly and then were never heard of again, maybe got TB and died, plus the famous ones. So we have Oliver Wendell Holmes, we have William Dean Howells, we have Louis Agassiz, who was a great scientist at Harvard. We have Frederick Douglass. We have Edward Everett Hale. But you see, we have Thomas Wentworth Higgins. But we also have James Parton, E.P. Whipple, C.M. Ellis, Charles Dawson Shanley. I know these people. I know what they look like. If you showed me a picture of them, I would know what they look like. Incredible. It's going to be incredible to go through these. I might as well show you them all, right, while I'm committed here. This is volume 16. This is from 1865. So the war either still raging or rightly over. One of these volumes is going to be the issue of the Atlantic Monthly that was so full of reflections on the death of President Lincoln. What are you doing? You can't blame me for the fact that I got books. Let's see. This is volume 20 from 1867. Rock solid, just perfectly made. Fantastic. This is going to have so much stuff. These are going to have so much stuff. And the actual Civil War era ones, 1861 to 1865, are of historical significance. I bet the Boston Public Library doesn't have these. What do we got here? This is volume 8. This is from 1861. We have volume 3. This is from 1859. And this is as solid as the day it was made. I could read this easily. The pages are not... Look at that. I opened right away to 1859. There's a long essay on Hans Holbein and the Dance of Death that, 160 years later was inducted into the Penguin Classic line. But this is just long essay. Do we even know who wrote this? It goes on for page after page after page. This is the sort of thing you used to get in the Atlantic Monthly. But no, look at that. It isn't even credited. It isn't even credited. I bet I could find out. I bet I know who did this. But it's a 20-page long essay on Hans Holbein and on the genesis, the origin, the printing history of that one masterwork of his that is now in the Penguin Classics. The last 2 biographers of Hans Holbein, do they have any idea that it exists? No. I guarantee you they don't have any idea that long piece exists. Then we have volume 9. This is from 1862. The war is raging in here. This won't all be about that, but there'll be a lot of it. And then finally, I'm going to finish up here. This is volume 6 from 1860. I'm just overjoyed to have these things. In every issue here, the Professor's Story, Willa Cather is being serialized in here. In every issue of these, there'll be plenty of things that that I've never read that will be of incredibly deep historical interest for me. Not just because of the light they shed on their time, but also because I know these authors. I know most of them are over on my biography shelf, and here is their work in situ. Here is where they were getting $75 to write this long piece on Torquato Tasso or whatever it is for a magazine that was becoming the greatest American magazine before it handed off that baton to the New Yorker a generation later. So I have now a whole shelf of these things. It's going to take me, I'm going to parcel these out, but I would consider it the find of the year if I found one volume like this at the Brattle Bookshop, as you know, because you've seen me crow about them when I do. To have a whole shelf full of them is just, it's the highlight. It's the highlight of this whole thing. And the amazing thing, like I mentioned, the amazing thing is that, what have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I've got 11 volumes of the Old Atlantic Monthly from the 19th century. And of those 11 volumes, 9 are in perfect condition. They could be read easily. The same as the day that they were shipped out to a library that marked them. The library gave them this marking here. So 9 of them are like that. There are only 2 that require the stereotypical old book handling. Other than that, they're good to go. so that is it. At 50 minutes, that is a mega book haul from an anonymous donor whose identity you will not be able to guess, I'm afraid to say. this person is delicate. So, I'm overjoyed, just overjoyed. I had to make a video about it. I am going to be parceling out these things for the whole of the summer. It's just a question now for me, what is going to be the candidate for tonight? I have all sorts of reading that I have to do tonight, but I'm going to pick at least something from here. I don't think it's going to be one of these Atlantic Monthly volumes because that would consume me for the whole night. It'll be a book. And I'm going to hope that it's not another Emma Lathan. It should probably be a Barbara Cartland. I haven't read one of those in a long time. But I'm going to save the Westerns for June on the Range. That I know. The rest, these are fair game. So maybe I'll report back on which one I picked. But anyway, that is it. That is what I had to share with you today. A mega book haul from an unexpected source. I'm going to wrap this up for now. God help us, this is long enough. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.